Atlanta Hawks season preview time. They've made changes again, and there's still a bunch of uncertainty in many different areas, and there's only one man that knows what's happening, and that is Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and lemon pepper wings stink. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_Beeble, on TikTok at redrock_Beeble, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free, and we are available on all platforms. So give us a thumbs up and subscribe and leave all your comments on the video side, and then double bang and go back and do the audio as well. So we are getting towards the end of the team previews, as most of you will be aware, and we need to talk Atlanta Hawks. And there's a little bit of buzz coming for this one, because this man not only knows what he's talking about regarding the Atlanta Hawks, but there's some. I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about it. We don't need to waste any more time because Brad Rowland is here. Brad, welcome.
Thanks for having me. As always, I am also excited to be here, my friend.
It's good to have you back for about the 10th year in a row. I think this is that we're doing this. We actually got to meet at Summer League this year as well, which for the first time I've seen you at Summer League. So that was good to get there and chat in person versus just doing it over the phone or over the video link and talk Atlanta Hawks. But we're here to actually dig into whatever this team is doing, whatever they're offering, whatever it is. And we know what the questions that people have are, and we'll get into those. Don't worry about that. But the way we're just going to start things off is just by looking at the players who have arrived to this team throughout the offseason, because it's not an empty list. They drafted Zachary Ricochet number 1, Dyson Daniels, Larry Nance come across in a trade. David Roddy is here for some reason. Nikola Drusic was also drafted by the team, and we don't know exactly when he is going to be available to play. But that's where we're at currently with the squad. Brad, I ask all the hosts, who is the biggest addition to this team? And curiously, you've given us Dyson Daniels. So it's going to be a Dyson Daniels heavy show, I think, here. Obviously, he comes across in the DeJounte Murray trade. He has shown flashes in the past. He showed some flashes in the Olympics. To the Hawks viewing him as like this is a fully fledged, well, not fully fledged, but like you're a starter. Like, we want you to be this guy for us.
I think so. Of course, you never really know. In fact, will probably be a theme throughout this conversation about there's only a couple guys that I would say are like fully locked into starting roles on this team, and he's not one of them. But it wouldn't surprise me if he started from day one. They definitely need his skill set, particularly defensively, and that's probably the biggest reason why I am highlighting him. Certainly you would probably point to Ricochet as like the long-term big addition here, but rookies are rookies, and I am skeptical of rookies, generally speaking. So with Daniels, it's really about the defense as the selling point, which doesn't necessarily appeal too much to the fantasy community, but at the same time, the minutes are going to be there for him along the way because of that defense. And of course, the offensive side is where he has all of the question marks. His life will be a little bit easier, I would imagine, next to someone like Trae Young compared to what was going on in New Orleans offensively. But he is certainly the guy who I think has the combination of the intrigue and upside along with the projectable role.
Yeah. So like, he played 22 minutes a night last season. He averaged 6 points. He had 13% usage, and the situation is very different. Like, again, people will use the very myopic view, I think, at times of like, well, now he has to play with Trae Young. When's he getting the ball? It's like, that's okay, but they had CJ Zion and Brandon Ingram, and he came off the bench, whereas the Hawks have Trae and like who? Like, nobody else is a high usage player. No one else demands the ball in their hands all that time. So even though he moves to play with Trae Young, this guy that's considered this insanely high usage player, like, Daniels' usage will probably go up. His minutes are almost definitely going to go up, and I'd expect a little bit more from him. His shooting is always going to be some of the question mark. He shot 31% from 3, really bad stuff from the line as well. But we're heading into, like, as a top 10 pick, he's heading into year 3. Like, this is the time where a lot of these guys, you put opportunity with third year in the NBA with experience, it can lead to some interesting things. We're not expecting him to become this, high usage, ball dominating player, but I do think that he is really interesting because, like you said, you cover the draft as part of your other job, Brad. Like, rookies are bad, and like, I'm not sure what your overall opinion was of Ricochet, but I don't think anyone's coming in expecting him to be the number 2 guy and take over games.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, this is an interesting situation across the board, but it's also a much better team than you would traditionally associate with a number 1 overall pick. And then you have a much worse number 1 overall pick than you would normally have.
That's
and
true.
that combination, and look, I actually like Ricochet as like a long-term high-level role player type, but not usually what you're thinking about in a number 1 overall. So he's going to play. That's just the politics of this. Like, I can't imagine him not playing a decent role as a rookie just because of the incumbency advantage of being a number 1 overall pick. But I certainly think that Daniels will play more. And also, I know Daniels' jump shot is certainly probably his biggest question, but Quinn Snyder is going to encourage him to shoot. I don't know if it's going to go in, but he will take more threes. I'm very confident in that.
Which is interesting because he only hit, 0.7 per game last season. So, that could very, very easily, you could see that number at least, or getting close to doubling, which is not a huge amount, getting to 1.4, but that's not an outrageous area for him to get to now. In terms of the guys that left this team, we already know, DeJounte Murray was the player that was traded for those guys to all come in. They lost Sadiq Bey, which I'm not certain is a big loss because he wasn't going to play this much of this season anyway. Bruno Fernando has gone up to Toronto. Wes Matthews, I'm not sure where he's going to end up playing. If he plays at all, then AJ Griffin was dumped off to the Houston Rockets. So there were certain things last season with this Hawks team, Brad, that we've heard spoken about, we've heard tangentially discussed at times, with a lot of the rumors about DeJounte Murray being traded even at the deadline and how that was likely to happen, and Quinn Snyder was allegedly asking for him to stay. But this locker room was bad, I'm going to guess, for most of last season. I don't know if that's I could say putrid, I could say like toxic, but there were a lot of problems in this locker room, and with some of those players that have left, even if you're not even considering the actual talent of the players, the vibes feel like they can't be worse. They have to be better.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably the case. There's this big argument happening in the more NBA world of addition by subtraction. Could the Hawks be better despite the fact that they lose their second best player, DeJounte Murray, and all those things? And, no matter where you come down on that, I think it was just time to make that kind of move. I think that the Trae DeJounte experiment very much did not work, and 2 full seasons was enough to realize it wasn't going to work. And they ended up moving on from that. There's, did they get enough for DeJounte? I liked the trade. It wasn't like a grand slam trade, but certainly clear out some of that stuff, a fresh start. And I think just, like you said, better vibes. Even guys like AJ Griffin, who they drafted 2 years ago to be a first round pick, didn't play at all, was kind of cast off. Him not being there anymore, not like a terrible vibes guy, but just it's always weird when first round picks kind of take this huge step back in year 2, and it was time to move on from him as well. So yeah, an infusion of interesting outside talent. How good they're going to be is up for debate, but certainly I think the vibes are better than they were a year ago. And look, the vibes go down for every team when you don't meet expectations, and the Hawks have not met them for several years in a row, and usually that gets worse and worse as it goes along.
I would also say that Larry Nance is an underrated vibes guy, I think, as well. He is, everyone loves him. He's always poking fun at people. He's doing that to former teammates, current teammates. He just seems like a legend. Now, I actually, when we're sitting here, it's August 26th for me, I did not think that Larry Nance was still going to be on this team, but if we're going to have a Hawks slogan for the last 5 years, it's probably I didn't expect he was still going to be on the team. For whatever player you want to chuck in there, that seems to be the case. I didn't think that Nance would be there. Who knows if he even starts the season? That leads to another complicating factor. But DeJounte has gone. We've already talked about the fact that Daniel steps up for the defensive role that DeJounte was supposed to be playing. Not that he was, but he steps into that role. I guess then we look at the offensive role, because he had a strong usage, almost 27% usage. He played 36 minutes. How do those shots get distributed? Because we saw the players coming in. It's Ricochet, it's Nance, it's Daniels. None of those are 26 usage players. As a rookie, Ricochet is not going to be there. Where do the shots go?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think the logical place people are going to point to is Jalen Johnson, because Jalen Johnson's their ascending potential star in the future kind of guy. I think that he, if you took a poll right now, he would probably win as the number 2 option on the team. I would probably argue that Bogdanovich is still the number 2 option on the team as far as like this very moment. Could Jalen pass him very quickly? I would say yes, but Bogey was very good last year, kind of in a sneaky way. People didn't really notice. But I think Jalen's a natural place for that to kind of go as like more usage in particular. I think he finished with like 19% usage last year. That's going to go up almost certainly. Bogdanovich is going to take as many or more that he was before. I think, he was kind of in this weird role a year ago where he was coming off the bench despite being clearly one of their top 3 or 4 players. Now he still might come off the bench, but certainly will be their number 2 guy on the perimeter behind Trae Young. I don't think Daniels is going to be a huge usage guy, but that's really one of the big questions is like, can Trae take more usage? I think he's probably going to. It might go back to where it was a couple years ago, pre-DeJounte, where the Hawks also always kind of managed to be very good offensively, despite the fact that it was everyone almost agreed that Trae was doing a little bit too much or a little bit more than you would want him to. But it might be more of that archetype where he might be up there in the top 2 or 3 in the league in usage this year, just because out of necessity, because they don't have that natural number 2.
Yeah, I think he's going to have to increase. People think that he's going to take every shot that DeJounte had. That's just not going to be possible. But going up 3 or 4 percentage points on his usage is definitely a likelihood. And then it's just 3 to Bogdanovich or 2 to Bogdanovich and a couple to DeAndre Hunter and a couple to the centers and 4 or 5 or whatever it is to Jalen Johnson. It'll just get spread around rather than one person stepping in, I think, into that role. We're going to come back and talk about a few other things with this Hawks team, including your projected starting group, Brad, which I cannot wait. Today's episode is brought to you by the Game Time app. If you are looking for tickets to an event, maybe you are looking for tickets to the Hawks home opener and you're excited to see what that starting lineup is on opening night, well, the place that you want to go is Game Time. And now, instead of wasting all this time looking through all of the thousands of ticket options, they've got a new thing called Game Time Picks, where they filter out the fluff. They get rid of the garbage. They remove the bad vibes from their listing of tickets and they put the good ones at the top, so you can just go straight to them and know where the value sits. That's along with all their other features, their zone deals, their flash deals, their all-in pricing, which you can turn on in the app as well to make sure you see the full cost when you're looking at the tickets versus getting that added at checkout. It is all there. So go in, check out the Game Time app, whatever tickets it is, whether it is basketball coming up, it's baseball, it is concerts, it's sport, it's comedy, it's whatever it is. Game Time is going to have that there for you. So easy stuff. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So we're here, Brad. We are at the stage where for the last 5 years, well, not 5 years, it's 4 years, but we have talked about, are they trading Clint Capela? What are they doing with Onyeka Okongwu? And when you sent this through, like I had to pull myself back, Brad, because like honestly, like there's only I can only get so hard. Like when I see this, the projected starters, you have Trae Young, you have Dyson Daniels, you have DeAndre Hunter, Jalen Johnson, and you've got Onyeka Okongwu. Is it happening? I know you don't know because we have been edged to oblivion with this for 3 years. We saw the minutes go up for Okongwu. He played 24, 25 last season. Are we here? Is it real?
I think at the very least, it's the biggest chance so far. I've been saying this on my show a lot. There's really been no time in the entire 4 years in which I thought it was going to be Okongwu.
Yep.
Maybe there was like a week last season when Capela was hurt. Okongwu played really well, and it was going into the All-Star break, and I was like, all right, they're probably going to do it. Here we go. And then Okongwu got hurt. Like that day. It was literally that day.
I said the exact same thing. It's here. He's dominating. He's starting. It's happening. Capela's not getting this job back, and then the dickhead gets hurt as well. And then we're back to Bruno Fernando or something.
That's right. I mean, and look, it's really fascinating, the whole team, but this is, of course, the encapsulation of that is will they or won't they here? And I'll raise my hand. I am still the guy who thinks Capela is pretty good. I know it's like a controversial opinion. Right. I think people just don't like him.
He's pretty good. He's pretty good.
Yeah, he's not what he used to be by any means, but he's still. I think he's undervalued at this point in time. And I think Okongwu, while I've always liked him, has been a little bit underwhelming to the point where my stock line is he has not forced their hand. Would it have been more interesting at some point had they made the switch? Yes, but he has not like made them do it. Is what I would say. But this is it's a fresh time. Capela's now an expiring contract. They got Nance in there as well. You know, you mentioned him earlier. They're not going to start Nance, I don't think, but like, you know, another guy there. I echo your sentiment from earlier that I'm kind of surprised that all three are still on the team at this point. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I'm not even necessarily calling my shot. It's just that I think if there was a natural time to go ahead and do it, you got a Okongwu under contract. He's your guy moving forward. You would think still Capela is now expiring. You don't have to worry as much about like nuking his trade value, all that kind of stuff. So I think if there was ever going to be a time to do it with both guys on the team, it would be now. But would it shock me if Capela starts opening night? No, it would not. What
we saw last year, though, is we did see it start to push like towards it. Instead of, you know, playing 29 minutes and Okongwu playing 19, we started to get to 26-22 or 25-23, and we saw a little bit of crossover between the two as well. So we were pushing towards that. And even if it doesn't happen, right, even if Capela does start, I think we're going to be more in that 24 minute split sort of situation versus Capela's a 30-minute a night player and Okongwu's playing 18. That would make zero sense. And I think that even you would be like, bro, what are you doing? Like, come on, we can't be going backwards here for a 29-year-old Capela on an expiring contract after we've just extended the backup. Like, we can't really do that. But that is a really interesting situation. Obviously, people can see on this list there's no Zach Ricochet starting, and for a number one overall pick, it's not a common thing. Now, you rightfully said this is not a regular team that gets a number one pick, and also didn't pick a regular number one pick player. So in the end, like the Hawks, I think had the 9th pick, and they probably ended up with a guy that, like, arguably say is the guy that would get picked 9th in a lot of drafts anyway. So in the end, it's sort of what they would have done had they not jumped up in the lottery. I understand that, like, you know, he may have been considered the best player by them in the class, but in terms of the overall value and the quality and the type of player, like, it's sort of the player that they would have got had that lottery luck not happened and it had been a regular strength draft class. So you don't have him starting. I could easily see him starting over DeAndre Hunter because, again, it's a number one pick and there's politics involved, and wouldn't say that DeAndre Hunter's forced their hand that he has to be in that position through his career. We're going to talk a little bit of Jalen Johnson later on in the show, so I don't want to harp on that right now. But what I do want to talk about, though, is the bench group. We've got Kobe Buffkin, Vit Krejci, Ricochet, Bogdanovic, and Capela. I thought Bogdanovic should have been close to, if not the sixth man of the year last season. Krejci, of course, they did not convert his contract, so they couldn't play him in the play-in, which he was very clearly, he should have, but they had other ideals in mind. I just want to quickly talk Buffkin here because in a very similar scenario to the Okongwu is starting, and let's see how it rolls the rest of the season. We saw Trae get hurt, and there was a great opportunity for Buffkin to step into minutes, and then he got hurt again. And that has been the common theme. And then he was going to be the point guard on the Summer League team, and he got hurt again. So is there an outside chance that he would start over Dyson Daniels? Because he's big, he's 6'5", he can handle, he can shoot a little bit theoretically. Would they want him to push into that role, or is it just like they're just not really sure what they've got at this point?
It would surprise me if he started early in the year, just because he's done so little, as you lay out. Like, the opportunities he had, he's gotten banged up. They do like him a lot. I know Quinn Snyder is a big fan of Kobe Buffkin, and that has not changed to my knowledge after the sort of lost-ish rookie season. I just think Dyson is just better right now, like at almost everything. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's a better defender, he's more projectable, all those things. And also, if you're going to start someone else, would it just be Bogdanovic, who is obviously better? I do think that Buffkin, if I had to project right now, is the backup point guard. But even that, I don't think Buffkin's in a pure point guard. I don't know what you think. Getting back to the draft, he's more of a combo. They did play him a lot and pretty much exclusively in the G League at point guard. But part of that's developmental, as you know. With guards like that, it's just good to have them get reps to run pick and roll and have the ball in their hands. So I still like Buffkin. It'll be a big year for him, I would say, to just establish himself in whatever role he's going to be in. Maybe it's a 15-minute-a-game night role that's mostly, behind Trae when Trae's off the court, alongside someone like Bogdanovic, take some heat off of him and not have him be the every down point guard kind of thing. But, long term, I think there's still a chance he's a starter or starting quality player at either guard spot. But for right now, he's just basically a rookie again. So for me, it's I can't imagine them doing that because they have so many other options.
I think ideally that you look at you're playing alongside Bogdanovic, like Buffkin just turns into Bogdanovic at some point in a few years. A guy that can play sort of both positions, handle the ball, can shoot, has got a bit of size. Bogdanovic is bigger, he's like 6'8", but Bogdanovic has been filling that role as the backup point guard at times, and a guy who's playing the two and plays off guys and plays on the ball as well. And I think ideally that's what they would want Buffkin to do. So even if he is playing a larger role this season, he's still going to have the guy who I guess theoretically he's going to replace down the line, on the team next to him. So his role is still not going to be that fully actualized role of what he can get into. Krejci is just that perfect low usage defensive player who again really shone at the end of last season. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of Ricochet here, but I've been pretty clear on my thoughts about him from a fantasy perspective. I just don't think he's going to be able to do enough. Brad, like we saw this in summer, he had a few moments where he stepped up and other times where he was just disappeared, and the shooting I think is going to be iffy. I just think he's going to be like very, I think reserved is maybe the right answer, and he can work into being a really good connective piece player, but that's not paying the bills in year one as a rookie. He's not putting up these big numbers, and it'd be interesting to see how they work him and Hunter into there. Like, do you think that politics will end up playing a large part in how that is all sort of decided?
It's interesting because there's politics on both sides.
Okay.
Like, you have the number one overall pick for sure, but Hunter's got 3 years left at $20-something million a year. There's politics in that too. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's part of the reason why I'm projecting Hunter. Hunter's the safe projection option to start on opening day. He's been this look, Hunter and Capela, but Hunter too has been the written in pen starting small forward every day of his career, basically to this point. Unless he's been hurt, he's been starting at small forward, and that could change. It's a different regime now. Quinn's there, but yeah, I think that all of these spots are kind of interchangeable. Same thing with Daniels. Like, would it shock me if they came out of the gate with maybe a young Daniels Bogdanovic trio on the perimeter? No, that wouldn't shock me. Daniels, I wish you had some defense there to kind of put between Trae and Bogey. All these guys they're not interchangeable, but as far as like roles are concerned, I have they're all going to play. I think the only guys that are like maybe in danger of losing minutes are guys like Krejci and Buffkin, who are clearly down the line. But Ricochet's going to play, and I think that Hunter, while he has his flaws, it would, if he's going to suddenly play 10 minutes a game, I would fall on my chair. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's one of those things where I think he'll start just because that's the default. But similar to Capela and Okongwu, if they come out of the gate with Ricochet, number one overall pick starting game one is not exactly going to be shocking to me.
No, it wouldn't be to anyone really, because that's just what they do, and like we'll see how they go. But like, Hunter's had trouble staying healthy. He's had trouble being productive many times. He's had trouble with his shot and his aggression and his usage and whatever. Like, he's like, I was going to say, he's like exactly what the worry I have with Ricochet is. He just sort of disappears and then does nothing for a period of time. And like, what are you doing here? Like, you're scoring sometimes, but there's nothing else that's coming. And like, he's always had those concerns. So it is, again, just another question to add onto this team. We've got more stuff to talk about, including some players to watch and breakout candidates. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. You have heard me and Brad, I'm sure, talk about FanDuel a lot, all the time, because they're America's number one sportsbook. Why wouldn't we talk about them? Well, now they've got something different for you and for everyone, all customers on FanDuel from now through to September the 22nd. If you place a $5 bet, you get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. You got YouTube TV base plan. You're able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market NFL game, and all you need is a Google account and a valid form of payment, and you can cancel any time. So just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. You can download America's number one sportsbook, and then you get the chance to watch all of these NFL games not for 28 days, Brad, but for 3 weeks. You get the free trial there over at FanDuel. So check it out, FanDuel.com/lockedon. And don't forget to gamble responsibly. Okay, so we've talked lineups, we've talked players arriving. Now, we've talked a little bit about this guy already, but he is your player to watch for this season. I gave the guests a little bit of carte blanche to decide how they wanted to frame that, whether it's a breakout or what it was. And it is Dyson Daniels that you got here. So again, we're just sort of highlighting this idea that he's the real focus point here. Not that he's make or break for this season, Brad, but he's relatively important into how they go. But what I do want to focus on now again is to dig a little bit more into Onyeka Okongwu as the make or break player for the season, because we talked about how you're projecting that he starts, and this is the opportunity that he has been waiting for, and a lot of Hawks fans have been waiting for. I want to start with a question on Okongwu here. What happened to his block numbers last season? Where did they go? Because one of the strengths of him was he comes in, limited minutes, and he blocks a million shots, and then they went from 5.3, 5.6, 5.2% down to 3.9. It's a sizable drop. What happened?
Yeah, I suspect it was partially schematic. They were playing a little bit differently defensively, in part because they just were trying to look for every answer possible. I'll stay away from this for the most part, but they were so bad defensively that it was kind of they started with one system, they changed to another one. They were trying to get Capela in a comfortable position, all those things. I was a little bit more, I don't want to say conservative, but they were trying to keep him on the court. I think maybe he also traded some fouls for blocks, or the other way around, so to speak. His foul rate went down. He's still a pretty high foul player, but it was a career low foul rate by a lot. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe he's trying to still figure out the midpoint between getting enough rim protection, getting enough block numbers, getting enough aggressiveness, and also just not fouling out of every game. Not fouling out, but I was tracking for a while. It seemed like every time he would be on the court for more than 5 minutes, it'd be 2 fouls, and they were trying to have him not do that. So, of course, he's going to have to be able to figure that out long term if he's going to be able to play starter minutes, 28, 30 minutes a game. He'll be fouling out if he's not figuring it out. So, I'm not worried that the blocks are going to be gone. But look, he's always been undersized. So if there's not that midpoint of being able to do it without fouling, one of the reasons maybe why he hasn't taken the job is that Capela can play 30 minutes, is a really low foul player, doesn't make mistakes. Okongwu is more mistake prone. The highs are higher for sure, but I am looking for that as well. I noticed that and prepping for this, block rate was way down. I think it'll come back up, but I'm not sure it's going to get back into where he was, a couple of years ago when it was 5.5% block rate. I'm not sure if that's the true number for him moving forward.
One of the things that changed with him, and I highlighted this a lot during the season, is just his number of contests were down. So he wasn't going for the blocks as often, and that is a schematic thing, which is interesting because when Quinn came in at the end, that All-Star break when Nate McMillan was fired, what he did was he empowered Okongwu a lot more during that period. He saw his usage rise, he saw his block rate rise during that period. So a lot of people, including me, were excited at this time last year, going, well, Quinn was really giving a lot of stuff to Okongwu. He was doing a bunch, and then it all sort of just disappeared. It was a real big change from what the change that Quinn instituted initially sort of flipped on its head and went back to worse than it was in the past. And again, you're right, it is make or break. He signed the extension. We've been waiting and waiting and waiting. This is probably the chance for him to show it. And if he doesn't, then the Hawks have to reassess, I guess, the direction that they're going at that center spot. And, because Capela's not getting any better at this age. This is what happens. You're old, you're 29, 30, the contract's expiring, and you have to make that call. And this is key. And you have to see what you got to see if this is the direction that you're going to go. Let's talk about a major storyline for this team for this season. I think, to me, the major storyline that I'm looking at here is it's just what I don't even know how exactly to phrase this, but it's more like what I'm looking at is, well, you've mentioned him already, Jalen Johnson, right? What is this the true breakout? Is he ready to be the number 2 star on this team? That is what we want to watch, because he didn't even start at the beginning of last season. He was Sadiq Bey and DeAndre Hunter. It took about 2 games, I think, for the Quinn Snyder to go, where he needs to start. And then he had suffered the broken wrist. He sprained his ankle 3 times during that as well. And he just, he took big steps forward. Now, a little worryingly, some of the early stuff that he did last season regressed as the season went on. His impact stats all dropped. Some of his shooting numbers all dropped. Not to say that he was bad, but he did sort of cool off a little bit as the season went on. But now there is more responsibility. So to me, it's can he be that player? Has he got more in the tank? If he is tasked with more, Brad, can he do it? Or is it we're going to see situations where the defense falls away or the efficiency drops off even more? That to me is the big question here.
I think he can do it, but it's going to be interesting to see where the actual baseline is, because you're right. Early in the year, and I you tried to walk that fine line between, pouring cold water and just being reasonable. And he was shooting at a level that was not anywhere in his profile earlier last year.
Yep.
He was shooting in the 40s from 3, and that was not going to sustain. And it's not just percentages. He settled in the mid 30s, 35.5%. I would take that big picture if I'm the Hawks, and from him from 3-point range. The volume was up, not sky high, but up. And look, if you just looked at the seasonal numbers from year 2, which was effectively his rookie season because he didn't play at all as a rookie, to year 3, like he had a traditional like most improved player profile last year.
I bet on him for most improved player, like middle of the season, like this.
It was a very reasonable bet.
And then of course he got hurt 3 times, but
right. he got hurt, and this like team success plays too much of a part in that kind of stuff. If the Hawks had been better, he would have gotten more attention, all those things. But as far as the stats are concerned, 16 points, 9 rebounds a game, like that's for a guy in age 22 season is pretty impressive. And I think that's real. I think that he'll take a step forward even from there as a scorer. I think he's going to average more points than he did a year ago. The usage will go up. My question is, and has always been with him offensively, is his half court offense. He's a terror in transition, and that leads to easy points, which is good. This is also for the Hawks, but it's also for him. Can you create efficient offense for yourself and other people in a half court? And that is the big task for a number 2 option, which he's probably trying to be. And right now, there's been too many times last season, and again, I'll give a little bit of a provision for him being young, where he didn't have the counter. Like, it was athleticism for sure. He has a little bit of like a turnaround jump shot that's pretty nice, but he's far too limited as far as like, what do I do next in the half court offensive setting? And he's just an okay shooter, all those things. The passing's okay, but I think that this is going to be really telling because everyone knows around the league, everyone knows in Atlanta that they're going to be like, he's the guy that has the growth on this team potentially. Can he take the next step? And growth is not always linear, but can he go out there and at least scale his scoring and not lose efficiency? Because overall, what was he league average last year? 58% true shooting. That's okay. Maybe a little bit better than that is what you're hoping for. But if you could just even keep that while raising your usage, the Hawks will probably be okay with that. And then defensively, just the block and steal numbers, obviously. He has the juice as an athlete to be able to create havoc. I've not been as impressed as some other people are on the like down to down defense, like doing the little things. But you don't care about that, Josh. You just want blocks and steals. So exactly. It is what it is.
Yeah, but and the thing is, again, like we can talk about real life on court impact and how that works, because sometimes that will impact Rowland minutes. But when we're talking about this team, like that's not going to impact him on this. Like if he has some struggles on the perimeter, guarding on switches or whatever, Quinn's not going to be like, oh, we're benching you so that Mo Gay can go out there and start. Like it's just not going to happen. We're not in that situation where like we have to worry. Like even for an Okongwu, if he really struggles, they can just say, well, we're just going to go to more Capela. They're not doing that with Jalen Johnson. So if he's gambling and he's struggling at times, we're still generating numbers. Like there's no real other option for them, I don't think, to move to a different area. The burning question for me, or one of the burning questions on this team, Brad, is it's about Trae Young, because there's a lot of criticism around Trae Young. There's talk of him being a losing player, getting coaches fired, moving off from DeJounte Murray. Look, yes, you would have heard it a million times, man. We need to get rid of. We should have got rid of Trae. Like he is. We'll keep DeJounte, build around him, which to me was obviously crazy. And the Hawks thought the same thing, because it's very clear to me that Trae is significantly better than DeJounte Murray. There are people who still now will be like, we need to trade out of having Trae Young on our team, which again is crazy because they don't own control of their draft picks, so they're not tanking and rebuilding. All of that stuff aside, we get another opportunity here to see Trae drive the team where he is the point guard. Not that he's going to be dominating. People think that him being in control means that it's no one else ever does it, which is not true, because he probably will lead the league in assists. But we get to see like where he is at now, because I think he's been robbed of some all-star berths over the last couple of years. Where does he go? Like what does he need to do to not even convince people, like to change a narrative around what he is as a player?
I think the easy answer, and it's silly, but it's also true, is they need to win. Yep. If they win more games, he'll get more positive attention. And I am totally with you. I won't rehash what you just said, but I think that if you told me 5 years ago or 3 years ago or 4 years ago even that Trae Young was going to become this underrated, I would have laughed at you, because usually guys who average what he averages don't become underrated. They become overrated, if anything, especially small guards, averaging 26 and 10 every year, and somehow he gets underrated. But here we are. But I think that the winning for sure. Would it be helpful if the countings, like if the scoring numbers got back to where he was 2 years ago when he averaged almost 29 a game? Maybe, but I don't know if that matters to him. I don't think that, there was a year he averaged almost 30 points a game. It was in the shortened bubble season, but that's a long time ago too. But I don't know, Josh, like would perception change if he averaged 30 and 10, but the Hawks won 36 games? I kind of don't think so. I think it really comes down to he gets blamed. It takes too much blame in my opinion, but no matter what you think about this, he gets blamed for the team's lack of success. And there's way more nuance that needs to be put to that, but he's the guy. I mean, when you only have one player on your team that is recognizable to a casual fan and your team isn't very good, that player gets heat, and that's what happens.
Yeah, agree completely. I think, yeah, and that's the thing, like, he can do whatever he wants during the season, but they need to go through, win the first round of the playoffs. He needs to average 30 points in a series and push them through, but there's also just something.
All of which he's done, by the way. Like, he took him to the
true.
conference finals and it's kind of funny to me because, not to cut you off, but like the way he's discussed is like a player who didn't have a great playoff run already. Like not only did they have a great playoff run, he was great in the run. Like and people have just forgotten that. And granted, the next year he had a terrible playoff series. Maybe that's why he was awful against Miami, and ever since it's been this conversation. But yeah, I mean, I think we talked about it earlier, but he had almost career low usage last year and still managed to have, 26 and 10 or 26 and 11, whatever it was. So I think he's capable of huge things. And I think offensively, as an engine of an offense, there are only a very few people that I would rather have than Trae Young. It's everything else. And there are also degrees of this. And this is not a fantasy observation, but his defense has gotten better. It's still bad, but it's gotten better, and no one cares because he's Trae Young, and the stigma will be attached to him for all time.
I also feel like the narrative police needed a new person after sort of James Harden has sort of aged out of his prime, because this is the exact same stuff with Harden. It's like, you can't ever do anything in the playoffs. All you do is score and you rack up assists, but who cares? You never defend. It's the same stuff on repeat. And there could be valid criticisms about both of those guys and their defensive performances and what they do to a team and how the team. Or you can have whatever criticisms around that, but it's the exact same sort of thing. And now that Harden's 34 or 35, it's like, well, he's old now. We probably can't put all those things on him just as much, because when you're old, you're expected to suck. And now, like, Trae is that guy that's in that very firm zone of being, that player that puts up numbers, but the team around is not good, and that's his fault. And yeah, I'm not I'm not the biggest Trae Young fan, but I'm also pretty realistic about who he is as a player, and I think he's awesome. Right. And I think there's just a lot of negativity that gets chucked out there that is not deserved. But as you're well aware of that already. Your bold prediction for this team, Brad, coming up for the season, you don't think. Well, your bold prediction is you think they will not be a bottom 10 defense, which is, again, on a team that does have Trae Young, is not an easy thing to do. But Dyson Daniels is a good defender. Larry Nance is and again, how the hell does he, where does he play, by the way? Because he's played exclusively center for 3 years, Larry Nance, and there are 0 minutes available.
I am right there with you on that. I would love to know. I think maybe he's the backup 4, maybe.
Yeah, but he can't shoot at all.
I agree. No, I'm not saying that's not what that's not what I want to do. It's just that's the only place that there is a somewhat of an opening right now on this team. But no, it may not seem bold if you don't follow the Hawks to be not a bottom 10 defense, but like they've been in the bottom 10 for a long time, which is why I used that. Last year they were bottom 5. I believe the year before that they were maybe like sixth or something like that. So it would be a step forward in a big way for them to not be a bottom 10 defense. And by the way, in contrast to that, if they're not a bottom 10 defense, they'll be pretty good. They won't be great by any means, but that's a playoff team if they're not a bottom 10 defense, because the offense has always been good. Even with, in fact, they were better pre-DeJounte on offense than they've been with DeJounte. But if Trae Young is alive and plays most of the season, they will be an above average offense. So if you're above average offensively and you're not a bottom 10 defense, you're pretty good.
Trae Young's also grown a beard as well. So like, yeah, he's serious. He's leveling it up. He's really got the new look going. He's ready to rock and roll. But and bringing in like a defensive point of attack guard who actually is a good defender and actually does defend is probably going to have an impact on this versus someone that claims to be a defender and all he does is bounce the ball off people's heads when he's playing in celebrity pro-ams. But we don't need to talk about DeJounte Murray too much anymore. Your record prediction for this season, Brad. Again, this team has the number 1 pick. There are a lot of people who got me at the bottom of the East is so bad, but the Hawks aren't in that bottom of the East to me. They're in the mid packs of the bottom of they're in that 7, 8, 9, 10 range, and things could go a couple of different ways and change over really quickly. You've got them with a winning record, 42-40. So they've been the masters of getting into the play-in the last couple of years. Is this another play-in year, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think they certainly have some upside beyond that. They have some downside below that. But I think if you were just lining up the East right now, as constructed, before any other trades or whatever happens, median outcome, somewhere in that 7 and 9 range in the East. which it's not inspiring, and I understand that. That's where the Hawks have lived for a while now. But last year they were a 36-win team. Granted, they had the injury to Trae late in the season, but they were 41-41 the year before that. So it feels like they're a 500-ish team. I'm a little bit optimistic about the moves, and they are better set up moving forward than they were a year ago. Not having their own picks, as you mentioned earlier, it's a very big deal moving forward. But they do have a couple of other picks coming in. They have some future-facing pieces. Ricochet, if they hit on that pick, and that's an if, will be helpful. But yeah, I see some growth. I know that the popular kind of, I use math in quotations here, is a 36-win team last year, loses its second best player. How do they get better? And I would say they were better than that last year as far as on paper, and the fit's just way better. And I feel like their defense is going to be better. So 42-40, 41-41, something like that. And that's in the East, that's definitely a firm playing team.
Yeah, I agree. And look, they were playing last season, winning those 36 games. But I agree that it's not just about DeJounte's gone, so you're bad now. It's about the pieces that fit in the right spots and seeing how, if Trae plays 10 more games, they're obviously significantly better than that. I just want to wrap this up, Brad, by asking you a quiz question. It's not really a tough quiz at all. You think you're going to be pretty okay with getting it, because this is the 24-25 season that we are previewing. And over the course of Atlanta Hawks history, there have been 36 players who have worn the number 24 or the number 25. And all I want to ask you is, who is the first player that comes to mind who has worn number 24 or 25 for the Atlanta Hawks?
First player that comes to mind would be Thabo Sefolosha, 25.
Number 25, 3 seasons. Bang on. That is why you are the GOAT, Brad. Of course, you could have gone with Kent Bazemore, whose name has appeared on plenty of these shows. He's number 24. The last number 24 on this team was actually Bruno Fernando, who is now gone. And the last number 25, the number 25 still exists. Do you know who number 25 currently is on the team?
Oh, Lord. I'm really bad at numbers, so I was glad I had one off the top of my head. 25 right now?
Yeah.
Garrison Matthews.
It is Garrison Matthews. He of the single T in the last name, he is there.
That's right.
Number 25, looking if there's any other funny names going down this list. Doc Rivers, of course, was number 25 back then. There's just a lot of players back in the olden days wearing the Tom Inglesby, Bob Duffy, Cleo Hill.
Sure.
Not big on my history on Andy Panko or anyone like that, but that's where we are. And Brad, now is the time for you to tell me what's going on over at Locked On Hawks.
Yeah, we're staying busy like everybody else is, ramping up. I'm excited for when there's actually training camp to cover. This is the interesting time of the year when we're just previewing some more. But I'm doing player deep dives with a good friend of mine, Glenn Willis of ATL 29. He's been on the show several times. Draft stuff, we're just trying to get to the end of the off seasons, Josh. It is what it is. We're trying to navigate it all, but I'm excited for when there's actual basketball to talk about again.
Yep, can't wait. NBA season, you're less than 2 months away, and all the Hawks stuff that you want to hear, including when the Hawks do decide to go back to Clint Capela over Onyeka Okongwu, you'll have it covered all over on Locked On Hawks. Thank you again, Brad, for coming on and chatting about the Hawks with me.
Thanks, Josh.
And that brings us to the end of the show. So don't forget to go and hit that old YouTube subscribe button. Thumb it up. Double bang. Leave all your comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.